Hi, this is Julia Chambers, and I'm presenting Organizational Factors That Influence Children's Book Selection, a research proposal from San Jose State's Library 285 Research Methods class with Dr. Chris Hagar. To give some background on my research topic, book organization in public libraries is a topic of interest to many librarians. Scholars have critically examined the Dewey Decimal Classification System, subject-based classification systems, and systems that are specifically about the organization of fiction. However, most of the research on the subject reflects the experiences of adult library users. And in fact, very few studies have examined how book organization in the library influences a child's ability to find books, particularly in the area of fiction. This lack of child-centered research confirms a documented problem in youth librarianship. Children can't find books they want to read. A 2008 survey conducted by Scholastic found that one of the key reasons children ages 5 to 17 did not read was because they couldn't find books they like. The survey found that 15% of children ages 5 to 8 listed the inability to find books they liked as a top reason they didn't read. And what I find even more alarming is that according to this survey, that percentage doubles by the time these children turn into tweens, ages 9 to 11. So what I'm really interested in is how these two concepts work in tandem. In other words, how book organization influences children's ability to find books they like. New research on children's book selection strategies with a particular focus on the selection of fiction books will begin to identify factors that influence children's ability to find books. As the head librarian of a small independent K-5 school library that has recently undertaken a reorganization of its fiction from a traditional author alphabetized system to one in which the fiction titles are organized by category, such as fantasy or science fiction, I have the unique opportunity to collect qualitative data on the topic of book selection from a group of children who have experienced looking for books in two very different types of organizational systems, from last year's author alphabetized system to this year's genre classification. And I think this offers a rare opportunity to explore a broad range of potential influences. My method will include the focus group format, and the results will aim to provide youth librarians with previously unreported insight into how the organization of fiction influences children's book choice. Which leads me to my guiding research question: does organizing fiction by genre influence the way children choose books in a K-5 school library? My sub-questions will include, what do children know about the different ways libraries organize books? And what do they know about the various genres of fiction? And finally, how do children browse fiction titles? This photo on this slide is taken from my school library, and you can see that the titles are grouped into their categories. Shown on the left is, I believe that's fantasy, and then to the right, the black label signifies scary books, and beneath that is sports novels. So you can see that each book has a spine label identifying it by its genre, but they're also grouped into their different categories. And within each category, these books are alphabetized by their author's last name, all except for the historical fiction section, which is further categorized by time period or movement, such as the American Civil War. And so I just wanted to provide some operational definitions for what I mean by genre classification in this library. In my literature review, I really wanted to see what had been studied on the link between children's book selection and book organization in libraries, and in doing so I found three general topics that researchers have previously focused on. The first was the Big Dewey debate, which essentially is a debate about a growing movement for libraries to reject the Dewey Decimal Classification in favor of a reader interest organization, particularly in children's collections. And the argument goes that children largely find books by browsing, and the Dewey Decimal system isn't an intuitively browsable system. So several case studies have looked at children's libraries that have adopted a reader interest classification system with great success. And you can see this quote is from one of those case studies, and it says, "Dewey is simply not suited to a popular collection intended more for browsing than research." The second topic I found involved research on genre-based organization of fiction with promising implications. Many libraries that have adopted some type of genre classification have reported increased circulation rates and increased user satisfaction. One librarian, Laura Stiles, I believe her name is a middle school librarian, and she turned her fiction section into a genre classified section. And she, in her report that she wrote about it, she wrote, "Now there's a large contingent of non-readers who stop by the library to find their kind of books." She was definitely a proponent of the genre classification. And finally, the third topic that I found regarded, how children do find books. And two studies identified two key findings. One was that shelf browsing is the most popular method for finding books among children. And the second was that children over the age of 9 tend to show a preference for a certain type of genre, with mystery and adventure novels being the most popular in that age group. So the literature review in summary, it does show a strong link in the connection between children's book selection and book organization, but there's room for more qualitative data on the topic, since most of these studies use only circulation rates to measure success and not qualitative data that can lead to richer information and interpretations. So in my study, my population is children ages in grades 2 to 5, and those are ages approximately 7 to 11 years. These children attend a small independent elementary school in a mid-sized Northern California city. And while the population does attend a private elementary school, roughly 38% receive needs-based financial aid, and over half report a mixed or non-white ethnicity. For my sampling, because this study relies upon the experience and perceptions of children whose school library has recently undergone an unusual and very specific type of reorganization, a non-probability sampling of convenience will be used. And for collecting the data, I plan to hold semi-structured interviews in grade-specific focus groups during the month of June 2013. That's approximately 9 months following the library's reorganization. And this proposed timeline allows the participants 9 months experience with a genre-classified system, but not too much distance from the former organizational scheme, which could discourage comparative reflection on the two systems. And as the school librarian, I will be leading the guided discussions, and they'll be recorded. And the general topics will include, general book organization in the library, genre classification, such as, can you give an example of what a genre is? Do you know what it means? Browsing the shelves, in other words, how do you look for books? And the fiction reorganization itself. So I'll be guiding discussion on what the children's thoughts are about the new organization, and finding out, do they look for books differently in this new system? So I actually anticipate a wide range of themes to emerge from the focus group discussions, and plan to adopt a grounded theory method approach of analysis. So after converting these discussions to transcripts, I'll use an open coding and axial coding systems to identify general themes and subthemes. I also plan to assign an independent coder to code independently, so that there are two versions that would offer some comparison and discussion if there are discrepancies on the coding, and also just to make sure there's no bias on my end, since I am the librarian of the library in question. So that will sort of act as a measure for that. And then I'll also conduct additional analysis to identify evidence of causal relationships between the variables. For instance, I'll be looking to see if there's for example, an understanding of genre as an organizational concept has an influence on a preference for or against a genre organized fiction collection. And then finally, I wanted to mention some ethical considerations. In order to conduct the study, the participants must sign an assent form, their children, and therefore I must also get consent forms from their parents, the school director, and the teachers involved. And again, all measures will be taken to protect the privacy of the information and the details of these children, for example, where they go to school. that type of information won't be disclosed. So there are two major limitations to this study that I can foresee. One, focus group discussions are often difficult to analyze. And the second being that the non-probability sampling means that the results won't necessarily translate to the general public. But I believe that the significance of the study far outweighs the limitations. I believe the study will serve the field of youth librarianship by exploring a topic that has not been covered in depth in the literature. And the data will provide insight on some influential factors of children's book selection process. I believe the study will provide valuable information about the effect of genreification in a school library, which will serve to inform a wider study, including public and private, small and large, urban and rural libraries for future researchers. And the data will further provide librarians with grade-specific data on how children define and understand genre categories and library book organization. And finally, fresh insight on how children browse the stacks could lead to organizational improvements that will help children find books they want to read. Finally, there are my references. Thank you.